Which aspect of your playing do you think needs most work? You might be coming with a whole shopping list. My intonation, my string crossings, my shifting. Well, you might be surprised that today I want to talk about something different. If you're new to my channel, my name is Julia Morneweg, and here we break down the art of learning how to play the cello well, one video at a time. If you enjoy my content, please consider subscribing, smash that like button, and if you really enjoy it, you can now leave me a little tip following the link in the description. So without further ado, let's get cracking. This is my 21st year of teaching this year. And in that time, one thing that has always struck me with students of all ages and all levels, from very young beginners all the way through to postgraduates and even already professional players, the one thing people tend to really neglect is working on their rhythm. The most foundational element really of the music. Without rhythm, we don't have music. So today I want to talk with you in a little bit more detail about that, and how we can go about sharpening our rhythm in our practice. When I started music college at the age of 16, I looked at my schedule at the start of my first term and noticed, somewhat to my horror, that twice a week at 9 o'clock in the morning we had a class scheduled that simply said rhythm. So there we were, a bunch of mostly hungover first year students assembling twice a week at 9 o'clock in the morning to do nothing other than practice rhythm. There were no instruments involved whatsoever. And tell you what, that was probably one of the most useful elements of my entire conservatoire training. So what went on in this class? The class was taught by percussionists, who are obviously the absolute experts when it comes to rhythm. And we were given this little book, which I still haven't cherished to the present day. It's called Tempo, Pulse and Rhythm, a Practical Method, Part 1. And so all it has is no tunes, literally just rhythms. Very simple things to start with, going to absolutely horrendously difficult things nearer the end. And what we had to do was conduct. So we had to conduct the beat and sing, vocalize those rhythms out loud. And suffice to say, it was really interesting actually how difficult pretty much everyone found that. I remember there were people in my class, especially pianists, who were already phenomenally accomplished on their instruments, had already won prizes, all sorts of things. And when it came to doing this, it was like, whoa, this is hard. But it was so incredibly useful, and I think it's probably, out of all the things I was taught at conservatoire, the thing that I draw back on most every single day in my job now. And that leads me to the first bit of advice about training rhythm, and that is the bulk of it should be done away from the instrument, because the moment we have got conflicting cognitive demands of technique, intonation, all of that, rhythm is the first thing usually that goes out of the window. So the more you can strengthen that aspect of your playing away from the cello and really build, I always say rhythm is something you have to feel in your gut. And the more you can really build this incredibly strong sense of pulse, the more of a sort of automatic rhythmic backbone you have when you start picking up the instrument. And then once all those other difficulties come in, the level of sort of attrition in the rhythm won't be anywhere near as bad. So how do we work on rhythm away from the instrument? There are actually, similar to what I just showed there in this book now, there are a lot of resources online that you can use. If you Google rhythm generator, you get websites like Rhythm Randomizer, for instance, is a great website where you can set parameters, what kind of note values you want, how difficult you want it to be, and then it basically gives you different rhythms. And it also has an inbuilt metronome, so you can really practice clapping, singing those rhythms with a metronome. And obviously, if you're completely new to it, you might really need to start just with very basic single note values from semi-briefs or whole notes, as you would say in America, minims, half notes, crotchets, quarter notes, and so on, in all different combinations until you really feel that you are comfortable with that, getting to grips with it. Because what I see a lot of the time is that people's technical skill on the instrument sometimes develops much faster than their general musicianship, and especially their sense of rhythm. And that's something that comes home to roost quite quickly, because the moment pieces get a little bit more complex, and if rhythms are all over the place, the music simply won't make any sense either to you or, and especially to the listener. So that is the first thing. The other thing is that whenever you have a new piece of music, really make sure you understand the rhythmic structure first. So set yourself a metronome, again, no cello yet. Just, I talked about this a little bit in the recent video about mental practice. Set the metronome, try to just either clap or sing the rhythm. And doing that regularly will also make you a much, much better sight reader on the instrument as well. Secondly, in my daily practice, I will always set aside a certain amount of time to work with the metronome. Of course, that is for me especially critical if I'm preparing either chamber music or orchestral parts where I'm going to be playing with other people, because that is really when any kind of rhythmic sloppiness becomes very, very apparent if you are trying to make music with other people. So that is really something where when I'm preparing a new part, right from the word go, I will be working very, very diligently with the metronome to make sure that I'm from the word go learning the music rhythmically really correctly. And often, of course, that means if it's something very complex, I might start with the metronome at a much slower speed. I might also set it to a smaller unit. So if it's something that at faster speed, let's say you would count in crotchets or quarter notes, I might take it down and actually set the metronome to 8 notes or quavers, just to work to that slightly more precise degree. But every single day I will identify a passage of music which I will work on with the metronome. And again, if you're in that habit and you're doing it constantly, it will really, really improve your overall rhythm. And one thing that's very important to say is when you're working with a metronome, there is a big difference between practicing with the metronome or practicing while the metronome is on. The two are not the same thing whatsoever, because practicing with a metronome is only useful if you are really paying attention that your playing is bang on that click. So if you have not used a metronome before, I recently had someone say to me in the lesson, I really don't like using the metronome, it really distracts me, I find it really stressful. If that is you, that means it really is high time for you to start using the metronome. Because if you find that you can't play while the click is going on, then that is a sure sign that you would find it almost impossible to play together with other musicians. And of course, for everyone, that is ultimately what we want to do. So if you're at that point, you need to start really from scratch, and that can be literally, first of all, practicing open strings with the metronome. So you decide you hold each note for 4 beats or for 2 beats or for 1 beat, and you really try to control that, really count along with the metronome clicks. Likewise, you can apply that very well to scales. You can create different rhythm patterns on your scales, for instance, with a metronome on. So you can be very, very creative with that, but it's really important that that is a regular part of your practice. Lastly, another skill to learn as early on as possible is what is called subdivision. And subdivision very simply means the ability that when you have different note values, let's say you have got a quarter note, 8th note, 16th note, subdivision really means you find sort of the smallest common denominator. So let's say you mentally try to fill your quarter notes with 8th notes or with 16th notes, just to really get that precision. And that particularly helps if you have to play dotted rhythms. So if you have to play dum ba bum ba bum ba bum ba bum, it really helps if you're able to think in your head. So the sooner you can learn that, you will start to play rhythmically much more precisely. So that's again something that I do from very, very early on with students, really to practice music, especially once, for instance, you get something that has got tied over notes. Yeah, so where let's say you have got a minimum tied over to, a half note tied over to an 8th note and another 3 8th notes following. To make a 4/4 bar, really, you want to almost instinctively get into the habit of filling that long note precisely with those 5 8th notes in your head. So that is again something to start practicing as early as possible, and then you will be well on your way. So overall, the message is make rhythm a priority. I remember many years ago when I was a teenager, someone said to me in a masterclass, rhythm is to music what the skeleton is to the human body, and I couldn't agree more, because without rhythm we don't have music. The music simply doesn't make any sense. And yet surprisingly, it very often seems to be almost the last thing that gets considered in practice. A lot of people have said to me, yeah, I usually try to learn the note first and then I do the rhythm later. No. Start with the rhythm first, every single time, because you will save yourself so much practice time. So that is my little bit of advice for the day. And as usual, any questions or comments you have, pop them into the comment section below. I always love hearing from you. And no doubt see you soon for another one. And in the meantime, happy practicing and get that metronome out.